Hello, this is Taylor Ellwood with Magical Experiments, and welcome to our weekly live stream. Tonight, I thought what I would do was talk about essentialism and magic and share some thoughts and perspectives about it. Um, one of one of my favorite books that have really come to I've enjoyed reading a couple of times now over the last couple of years is this book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown, and it's all about the disciplined pursuit of less. I read it a couple years ago when I was in the process of trying to figure out, like, what did I really want to do with the rest of my life. My businesses had crashed and burned. Here I am working at a call center. I know I don't want to work at the call center for the rest of my life, but I've got to figure out what I want to do for the rest of my life, what's going to bring meaning to my life. And that's basically what I ended up deciding upon. um, I decided that I needed to get some different perspectives, and this was one of the books I read, and it's actually the book that really helped me begin to figure out, like, what it is that I really want to do with the rest of my life, because essentialism is all about exploring many different things in order to find the essential few things that you absolutely must do, while discarding the trivial many. We live in a society where, the focus is on trying to do lots of different things, and you see people multitasking all the time. Multitasking is treated as this amazing thing when actually it really isn't. In fact, if you actually can't multitask, because really you have to shift from one thing to another, and every time you shift from one thing to another, you end up it ends up draining away your effectiveness. And I know this because I work in a job where I'm multitasking all the time. I'm handling customer calls, I'm responding to other people's, issues in chat at my work, etc., and doing other things, etc., etc. And eventually it gets to the point where it's like, the focus is so much on trying to get as much productivity out of people doing many things at once, but actually you really aren't doing you aren't it's really not a productive way of doing things. So anyway, I read this book, and I really identified with it, because I realized that my own perspective on magic is really one that is very much about simplifying magical work, focusing in on the essential. And as I was applying this to my life, I also began asking myself, how can I apply this to my magical practice? Big surprise, right? And what I realized is that if I wanted to apply it to my magical practice, I really had to begin looking at my magical practice from an essentialist perspective. Well, an essentialist perspective is really about this focus on what the essential few is, and and recognizing what that is, and prizing it above everything else, and focusing on it above everything else. And in my case, as I was looking at my magical practice, I began to recognize something that I had also recognized about my life. I had spread myself way too thin. I was going all over the place in my life and also in my magical practice. And I decided that it was time to refocus. So what I ended up doing is I asked myself, well, what is essential? What drives me when it comes to my magical practice? Like, what is it I care about? And the obvious answer would be magical experimentation. But as I began to think about it further, I was like, no, it's not just magical experimentation, it's how magic works. I want to be able to understand how magic works because it fascinates me. I want to share that with other people. And so that's really what ended up what's driven my focus over the last couple years. And anyone who has read some of my earlier books and then read some of the more recent books would likely agree that, wow, Taylor seems a lot more focused. Well, I am, because, well, I love my earlier books, and they're amazing books. Let me be very clear about that, and they've got some great ideas. What I've really focused on in both my writing and my magical practice is this concept of, how does magic work? How do we explain how it works? How can we do quote unquote advanced magic if we don't even understand the essentials of how magic works? And so that's my focus, is really on this recognition of exploring how magic works and explaining it and making it approachable for people. Which isn't to say that I'm not going to put out some more advanced work, because I do have projects that I still want to work on. But I find that in choosing to focus so sharply on that that this understanding of the essential few and sacrificing the trivial many, that what it's really giving me is this incredible focus with my writing, which has produced some amazing results, in terms of what I'm putting out there. And so the same thing has applied to my magical work, because the focus, if my focus in terms of my writing is on exploring and explaining how magic works, well, obviously my own magical practice has to be about that too. And so it's allowed me to really hone in on that and prioritize that as the most important thing for my magical work. And so accordingly, that's really what's shifted my messaging and everything else, both in terms of yourselves, but also to myself, and in terms of the work that I actually do. So when I look at applying essentialism to magic, and really to your life, I mean, it does come down to this notion of, well, what is absolutely essential? What is it that I need to do? What are the 2 or 3 things that I am called to do in this life? And in my case, I mean, I can tell you what those 2 to 3 things are. I'm called to, of course, practice magic, and I'm called to write. Those are the things that are absolutely essential. It's why I've pretty much just kind of like said, like, I'm not going to really teach classes anymore. I see some people out there and they're teaching classes, and that's amazing and awesome, and that's what they're suited for. For me, my focus is on the writing and on the magic itself, and on staying focused on those essential few things, because that level of clarity and focus is driving the work that I do. And you can apply this to your own life. I mean, what is it that you are absolutely called to do? What are the things that are essential to you? You may find that you need to explore many things in order to discover the essential few, and that's perfectly okay. That's actually a tenet of essentialism. But what ends up happening is that as you explore those things, you begin to rule out what you don't want to do. And I'm a fan of that myself, because I mean, like, when I look at how I approach magical work, one of the things that I always say to people is, like, if you're going to do a magical working, why don't you not only define what you do want, but also define what you don't want? Because when you get clear on what you don't want, then that brings a purity to your magical work that allows you to actually get what you want without having things muck it up that you just don't need. So when you apply this to every aspect of your life, this philosophy of essentialism, it shifts the direction of your life dynamically, because you're no longer wasting your time on things that you recognize are trivial. Like, for me, how I came to realize that classes were part of the trivial many, is that I started trying to teach them again, and I enjoyed it for a little bit, but then I realized, this is really taking away from the writing, and that's what I really want to do. I want to write. Okay, well, if that's what I want to do, then why am I doing these classes? What's my reasoning? And the reasoning I came away with was, well, I needed to explore and understand whether or not this is what I really wanted to do. But I just don't, it doesn't grab me or thrill me in the same way. And it was the same thing, like, with my magical work. Well, why do I do this? Because it's something that speaks and calls to me on such a deep level that I can't imagine my life without it. And it's the same with, well, pretty much everything else I do. Like, everything I do has to fit into this thing. Is it driven toward the essential few? Is it supporting what absolutely must be done? And so when you apply this to your own life, you'll find that it does significantly change your life, because your focus is going to be on those things that only really significantly matter. You'll let go of all the other stuff. And if you do have to do something that's part of the trivial many, that's fine. I mean, you may have to. Like, right now, I'm working at the job that I'm working at. That's part of the trivial many. It's not part of the essential few, but I'm doing it because that's what I need to do for the moment. But even so, because I'm so focused on the essential few, it is basically propelling everything I do outside of that job to helping me get out of that job. And when you think about that and how powerful that is, like, when you have that level of focus and clarity, it changes everything. because you know what you want to do, and you're no longer being weighed down by everything else that you could be doing. You've simply focused on what really matters. And when you apply this to your magical workings, it's the same thing. Well, what is it I'm really doing with these magical workings? What's really important to me? When you know what's important to you, what drives you, it changes everything for you, because you're no longer stuck on trying to do everything. Instead, you realize this is what my magical focus is about. Like for me, the magical focus is on magical experimentation in order to understand how magic works. That's why I do what I do. It's not about being a pagan. It's not about um, anything that doesn't fall out. Basically, anything that falls outside of that very essential focus doesn't matter to me at this point. I just don't care. And I'm not saying that it doesn't matter to other people. It may very well. But like for me, devotional practice really isn't something that I'm about. What I'm about is that essential few, focusing on, magical experimentation in order to learn how magic works. And that's all that matters. And you can apply that same thing to your own magical practice. And it doesn't have to be the same thing as mine. I mean, it has to be something that speaks to you, that calls to you, that drives what you do and informs everything about that you're about when it comes to your spiritual practice, when it comes to your life, everything. And it has to be one of those things where you basically recognize, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to sacrifice the trivial many. So if I'm engaged in something that's part of the trivial many because I have to be, that's fine. But I'm going to do everything I can to get out of that, because staying in it in the long haul is just going to ultimately detract from the essential few. And that's what we don't want. So what we do is we leverage the essential few to get us out of the trivial many. And we basically inject every single thing that we do that isn't everything that we do outside of whatever it is that we have to do for the moment in order to survive or whatever. Everything we do is driven toward getting us out of that circumstance so that we can just focus on the essential few. And that's really what I'm discovering and experiencing with this shift in my magical work and the writing and everything else, is that focus on the essential few is what is going to get me out of this job so much sooner than it would have otherwise, because I'm doing everything I can to leverage that essential few to pull me out of something that's part of the trivial many. And I'm sacrificing the trivial many in favor of the essential few. You know, I had a person ask me today, like, what do you do after work? And it's like, well, I go and I exercise and I meditate and then I write, or I market my books. And that's basically what I do. And then I play a little, I watch a show or play some video games at the end of the day. And that's really what I do. I mean, the focus is, okay, exercise and meditation, because I need to take care of myself. That's part of the essential few. And then meditation is part of really that magical work. And then it's writing or marketing related to writing, because that's what matters, right? And so I'm always doing something, anything, to focus my efforts. And that's really what happens when you apply this kind of philosophy to your life. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. And that's just kind of my perspective on things. So feel free to take it with a grain of salt, but it's how I'm approaching stuff. And it has radically shifted my magical practice, and it's radically changing my life in a very short time, all things considered. And, when we look at results in magic, I mean, sometimes what we have to really look at is like, how do you get from point A to point B? Well, sometimes how you get from point A to point B is that you really have to be willing to change everything in order to get what you want. And if what you want is more important than like the circumstances that you're in, then you will be willing to sacrifice the trivial many in favor of the essential few, because you'll recognize that the trivial many are just distractions and not worth your time and effort. All right. Take care and have a great evening, and see you next week.